Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review. And today we're taking a look at 3 budget headphones. And you might think I've misspoken there because the headliners for this are the Sivga SV021, or the Robins as they're known, and the BLON B60. But I've thrown in a third headphone for comparison in the form of the Meze 99 Neo. So let's jump in and see how they compare. Something else that I'm testing in this video is the new M90X microphone from Beyerdynamic. This is part of their new Creator range. It goes alongside the new DT900 and 700 Pro X headphones that I reviewed recently, and so I'm checking it out to see what the microphones are like. For this video, I'm going to switch back and forth between my normal microphone and the new M90X, and in a future video, I'll be checking out the M70X. So if you're interested in microphones, do take a listen to the different audio in this video. I'll make a note on screen when I switch between them, and I'd love to hear your comments as to which audio you prefer. It does mean that I won't do very much treatment to either microphone, just basic EQ to fix room issues, but beyond that, you're going to be hearing pretty much what both microphones produce. So watch out for that, but more importantly, let's talk headphones. What we've got here today, as I've already said, are the Sivga SV021. This is a $179 closed back headphone. And then we've also got the BLON B60, which is a $155 closed back headphone. So both are closed back and very affordable, and I have to say that they're quite enjoyable as well. But I won't let the cat out of the bag completely yet as to which I prefer and what I do and don't like about them. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to Sendy/Sivga for sending me the SV021, and to Linsol for sending me the B60. Finally, before I talk about them individually, I want to mention that both of these are very easy to drive. They're 32ohm headphones, both of them, and they've both got sensitivity ratings of above 100 decibels. And what that means is you can drive them from anything. A phone, a dongle, a desktop system, anything you like, it's going to do just fine with these. So now let's talk a bit about the design and the comfort and a little bit about the sound of each individual headphone. And then we'll get to the comparison between the two and also bring in the Meze 99 Neo at that stage. And I'm going to start off with the Sivga SV021. The first thing you notice about the SV021 is it's a really nice looking headphone. This does not look like a cheap budget headphone at all. It's got lovely wooden cups. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the other color scheme, which is like a brighter wood and tan leather, if I remember correctly. I don't like the look of that so much, but this darker version, which is still wood, you can see the wood grain when you look up close, is absolutely beautiful for a budget headphone in particular, but really at any price point. We've got metal used for the yoke and the arms, as well as the connection points to the headband, and they're done in a nice, tasteful, kind of satin gunmetal grey. We've then got the timber, as I've already mentioned, and then these super duper soft and supple and squishy pads, plus a headband that's not quite as soft and squishy. It's got the same sort of softness, but there's not as much of it on the headband, but again, it's wrapped in a nice soft leather or fake leather. Apologies, I don't know if it is fake leather or not. If that matters to you, you will need to check out the website. On the bottom of each cup, we've got a pair of 2.5mm connectors. I know that's not everybody's favourite, but at least it's a double entry so you can run these balanced if you want to. And really, these just feel like a lot more headphone than what you're paying for them. All this plush padding translates as well to a very comfortable headphone. I would have liked just a little bit more padding on the headband. I do feel not hot spots or pressure, but I don't feel as padded. I don't feel like they disappear quite as much on the head as they do on the ears. It's a minor gripe, but it would have been nice to see just a little bit more padding. Putting down the headphones for a moment, we also get a cable, which is fine. It's nothing special, it's just a cloth wrapped cable with a 3.5mm at one end and the 2.5s at the other. So nothing special, but completely fine. The one other thing you get in the box with the SV021s is you do get a canvas style pouch. There's no crush protection of any sort, it is just a little canvas bag. While we're still talking about the SV021, let's discuss briefly how they sound in isolation. These are a punchy, bass forward closed back headphone, but they do still have a nice sense of mid-range and treble presence as well. So they're not all bass, but they are bass forward. I do find that the treble from the SV021 can be just a little bit tinny sometimes, but that's just a lack of refinement and it's what you generally get with the cheaper headphone. So it's not a huge deal, but I did want to clarify that this is not some giant killing amazing headphone. It happens to have a fairly good balance of frequency response whilst also being a little bit bassy, but it does show a little bit of a lack of refinement when you start to listen critically. Overall though, it is a lot of fun. The mids come across just a tiny bit boxy sometimes depending on the track, and so things like female vocals will sometimes have a nice richness but lack a bit of the texture and air that you might be expecting. Again, it's not bad, it's just that it shows that it is a more affordable headphone due to some of those minor flaws in the overall tuning. The sense of space in the soundstage and the imaging quality is also very good for an affordable headphone. And I'll put that more into context when we talk about the B60 and also the Meze 99 Neo, but I do think the SV021 is quite strong there. For me, this is a brilliant headphone if you're listening to rock, electronica, anything where you want that rhythm and that drive from the bass. They are a lot of fun and they're very comfortable to boot. So obviously we'll go into more depth in the comparisons, but I'm going to start off by saying that I really like the SV021. And so let's now jump over to the B60 and see how it fares. The first thing I'm going to mention about the B60 is I think it has the nicer feeling cable. BLON have provided a nice sort of twisted cable that's also fabric wrapped, but it feels just a bit thicker overall, nothing too heavy, but thicker overall than the Sivga cable, and I do like it. It's got a nice right angle plug that feels solid and sturdy and quality, and it's terminated as well in 2.5mm connectors. So they're very similar overall headphones in terms of connections, but the cable on the BLON is just a little bit better in my opinion. Putting down the cable, let's cover off the other accessory that's not here on my desk, and that is that you also get a carry pouch with the B60s. It's a leather or fake leather pouch. It's going to provide a little tiny bit more protection than the canvas pouch with the Sivgas, but again, it's still just a pouch. No crush protection, no impact protection, it's just going to stop it from banging up against other things and maybe getting scratches. What's more important though is the design of the headphones themselves. As you can see, these are also a wooden headphone, but they don't feel or look quite as nice or high quality as the Sivgas. It's a lighter feeling headphone, even though it's also got the wooden cups. It just feels a little bit lighter and a little bit less well made than the Sivgas. Having said that, that lightness does mean that they're very comfortable on the head, but in this case we've got a better, more comfortable headband setup which uses a sprung suspension mechanism, as opposed to having the nice soft plush pads. In the case of the B60s, they're not quite as soft and plush as on the Sivgas. So it's a bit of a trade-off. We've got a great set of pads and an okay headband on one, and we've got a great headband and an okay set of pads on the other. Funnily enough, when I was looking at these, what I noticed the most was that both the pad design and the headband design actually remind me of other Sivga headphones. So I don't know if they're sharing OEM parts where they're buying from the same wholesale manufacturer of things like pads and headbands, but there's definitely some similarities here between the BLON and some other Sivga models. Ultimately though, these are another nice headphone to wear. They're probably not quite as comfortable overall as the Sivgas, but they're plenty comfortable enough. In terms of tuning, the B60s have a very different sound. They're much more focused on mid-range and treble, so they're a brighter overall headphone, and that can be great for vocals and really getting in and hearing the texture and clarity of vocals, but it can also get a bit fatiguing depending on the track. In some ways, the sound comes across a bit more refined than the SV021, so whilst it has more treble, the treble is a bit better controlled. It doesn't have that little tiny bit of tinniness that the SV021 can sometimes have, and maybe that's down to the fact that the B60s are using a beryllium coated driver. Maybe it's just purely the tuning. Either way, it does sound a bit more refined, but it's a much more treble forward sound. One area though that they don't fare so well against the SV021 is that the B60s produce quite a wide but flat soundstage. They can sound a bit congested sometimes because there's limited depth in which for all the sounds to be reproduced. And so as we'll talk about as we go through the comparisons now, you will hear me talk about the fact that for me, the B60s do fall a little bit short in soundstage, but they've got their other strengths as we'll go through in a second. For this comparison, we're going to bring in the Meze 99 Neos. I'm a huge fan of these. I'm not going to review them formally here in this review. I've covered them off. It's a very old review now. It looks very different, maybe a little bit cringeworthy when you look back at the quality difference, but I have reviewed these before, so check out my full review if you want to know more about the 99 Neos. The Neos retail for $199 which makes them a full $40 more than the B60 and $20 more than the Sivga SV021. So they are more expensive, but in my opinion, they're still what I would class as an affordable closed-back headphone. So I thought they were a relevant comparison. I'm going to run through a couple of tracks for this comparison. I've listened to more than just what I'm sharing with you here, but the conclusions I draw from each track do follow through and are quite consistent across the board. The first track I tried is Hey Jude, but performed by Steve Miller as part of the Art of McCartney album. I started my testing on this track listening to the B60s, and the first thing I noticed was a lovely texture on Steve Miller's vocal. That didn't last too long though, because then the cymbals kicked in and it was all about the cymbals. With the B60's emphasis on treble, the cymbals really came forward and were a bit over-pronounced in the mix. As the drums then started to come in, some of them sounded fine, but some of them just sounded a bit tonally off. And that's where these headphones with upper mid-range and treble emphasis can sometimes go a bit wrong. There's lots of sense of detail and clarity, but the tonality, the timbre of instruments just isn't quite right for me. As I've already mentioned, that sort of sense of soundstage congestion came up with the B60s on this track, where things felt like they were spread out left and right, but a bit congested overall, and each instrument sounded like it didn't have quite enough space to operate in. What I found as well was that as the track went on and got a bit busier and a bit more intense, the B60 did start to come across as just being a little bit harsh and a little bit splashy. Again, it's mostly due to its tuning, in my opinion, just being a little bit too much skewed up into the upper mids and treble. Having said that, I am also conscious that this is probably not the best recording in my collection, and so I thought it best to try the other headphones before drawing any conclusions. Jumping over to the SV021, and coming from the B60, and this is important, the SV021 initially sounded really boxy, but most of that was contrast from the B60, and it's something to be aware of when you're jumping back and forth. As I let my ears and my brain adjust to the tuning of the SV021, the boxiness went away mostly, but it didn't disappear altogether. They do have a very slightly boxy sound to them. The cymbals and drums, which I spoke about on the B60, generally sounded more natural from the SV021, but some of the toms when they came in, so the lower sorts of drums, once again did start to sound a bit boxy from the SV021. Overall, I think it's closer to natural than the B60 on this track, but still a little bit off. The SV021s provide a better sense of space, but given the quality of this recording, not having a lot of space to start with, they're still not great. But the fact that they are an improvement on the B60 goes to show that the SV021 is a little bit stronger in that regard, and our next track will give us a sense of whether it's very much stronger or just a little bit stronger, but we'll get to that in a moment. Interestingly though, at this point I asked myself the question, on this track, which of these two would I actually want to listen to? And despite the fact that I've said that the SV021 is overall a little bit more natural, I actually found myself enjoying this track a bit more on the B60s. And I think that's important to note because while none of these headphones are perfect in my opinion, they're all strong in their own way. They're going to suit different people for different reasons. And I'll try to continue to illustrate that as we go through. I certainly have my own personal preferences and we'll get to that, but I don't think you could go too far wrong with any of these as long as you match the headphone to your personal tastes. But to help paint that picture and clarify what might be right for you, let's talk now about the 99 Neos still using Hey Jude. Moving to the 99 Neos, the most obvious thing immediately was that the vocals were brought forward. They were closer to me, it was a more intimate presentation, not closed in, not claustrophobic, but it was a very different presentation from the other two. I also found that the overall tonal balance was better. It's still not ideal, the 99 Neo isn't a perfect headphone, but it was closer to natural than either of the other two. I felt like the cymbals were kind of on par with the SV021 in the sense that they've got a nice sense of clarity and a bit more realism, and they're not pushed forward like they are on the B60. The drum kit is also better balanced, much like the SV021, but instead of the Neos getting a bit boxy like the SV021, instead on even lower drums, they started to get a little bit boomy and a little bit flabby. I personally quite enjoy the bass from the 99 Neos, even though it can be a bit over the top sometimes. But on this particular track, it really didn't work that well, and the result to me was a sound that was just a little bit boomy, a little bit flabby, and a little bit loose. And so for me, at the end of this, I actually found myself probably preferring, across all three, the rendition from the B60s. But keep in mind, that's on one track that's not a great recording at the best of times. And so let's now talk through all three with a better recording to illustrate the fact that everything I've said is actually pretty much the same, but that how that plays out on different recordings and depending on different preferences could be a big deciding factor as to which of these you go for. Before we move to the next track though, I do just want to jump in and say that if you're finding this review useful and helpful, I'd love it if you'd hit subscribe, ring the notification bell, and hit the like button. It helps YouTube know that you want to see more content like this from me, and it helps me to know what sort of videos you like to watch. So if you're finding it helpful, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, hit the like button, and now let's continue with the review. The next track that I took notes on after listening to a whole lot of other stuff as well was Whispers and Moans by Crowded House. And this time I went in reverse order, so I had the 99 Neos on my head to start with, and this track sounds wonderful through the 99 Neos. The bass runs deep, but it's well controlled. The vocals from Tim Finn are really well rendered and clear. The guitars and percussion are nicely balanced with a natural tonality to them, and there's generally a good sense of space for all the instruments in a modestly sized semi-spherical soundstage. What I mean by that is the soundstage comes out from the side of the head a little bit, and it wraps in a fairly consistent circular sort of shape around the head. So it's very natural and it allows for a very realistic positioning of the instruments. Ultimately, the 99 Neos show on this track why I think they're such a great option, and why they've stayed in my collection for all these years since my original review. They're not the very best closeback on the market, but at their price, I do think they're hard to beat. And of course, if you don't like the bassy tuning of these, there's also the 99 Classics, and I think there's also another version over on Drop, I can't remember the name of them, but that gives you another tuning again, if I'm remembering correctly. So these are a wonderful headphone as they were showing me now that I had a better recording in front of me, but I was also interested to see just how they stacked up against our other players on a good recording like this one. And so moving in reverse order from the first comparison, I now went to the SV021. Throwing the SV021s on my head, what I heard straight away was that upper mid-range emphasis that they've got compared to the 99 Neos. It's not huge, but it's just enough that it throws off that tonal balance. And I think it's also partly because there's a bit too much treble energy, and it makes the overall upper registers just a little bit overdone to be as natural as I'd like them to be. So to be clear here, these are a fairly bassy, warm headphone that just has a little bit too much extra treble that just tips things off a little bit. It probably is something you could EQ if you wanted to play with EQ, but straight out of the box, I do find they're just a little bit too treble happy, and I would have loved to hear that pulled back just a tiny bit to help them sound a bit more natural overall. They are by no means a bad sounding headphone, but to me that tonal balance is where they trip up just a little bit. I felt like coming from the 99 Neos, the SV021 produces a better sense of space than the Neos, so the overall soundstage is a little bit larger, and the separation of individual instruments is also a little bit better in my opinion, but I felt like perhaps the focus of each of those images is just a little bit less precise than the Neos. And that could just be a factor of it having more space to work in, and therefore having slightly less precise imaging. It's not a bad thing by any stretch, but that's the difference I noticed. Ultimately for me, I still found the SV021 a very pleasant listen on this track. Despite that slight tonal overbalance into the upper mids and treble, the sound was generally really enjoyable. The vocals, guitars, percussion, everything was nicely placed, nicely imaged, well separated, and it was only if I was critically listening from a naturality point of view that was the only time I felt like anything was off. So if for some reason you're not into the idea of the 99 Neos and you are looking for something that's punchy and fun and enjoyable, then the SV021 is absolutely a great option. But that of course then begs the question of how the B60s fare now that we've got a better recording. And so changing over to those, the very first thing I noticed was how left-right spread the soundstage was. Suddenly I was missing the space and a little bit of the depth that both the 99 Neo and the SV021 provided, and everything was very flat and very left-right. So it's kind of like you've got a central image, a left image, and a right image, but they don't always talk the way they should to one another. I also found that because of the very mid and treble focused tuning, the vocals from Tim Finn now sounded a little bit disembodied. It was just a little bit too lightweight for my preferences. And ultimately that carries through to an overall tonality going even beyond the vocals, where everything's just a little bit off from the B60s for me. One benefit of that tuning is that I was hearing details from the B60 that I didn't hear in the other two. And that's because of a phenomenon called masking, where some of the lower sounds being louder are masking sounds higher up. So you can hear more details from the B60 because of the way our ears and our perception works, and that's going to be enough for some people to prefer them without a doubt. For me though, I don't like the unnatural tuning that they have. It's not a bad tuning, but it just doesn't sound like a lifelike representation of having the musicians standing in front of you. So at the end of all this, my conclusions are that I think all three headphones are strong in their own way. For me, I think the 99 Neo and the SV021 do take a significant step ahead of the B60s, but I have no problems at all putting on and enjoying the B60s for what they deliver. And what they deliver is that mid and treble forward presentation. They are a bit bass light, but within that tuning, they're actually providing a relatively refined sound for a headphone at this price. Keep in mind, these are $155 worth. And so when put into that price context, they're still a really nice choice. They're way better than the BL30s or the B30s, I can't remember now, those absolute train wreck headphones that BLON released some time ago. The B60s are very listenable, they're nice enough quality, they're going to do exactly what some people want. And on some genres, like say female vocals, lighter acoustic stuff where you don't need as much bass extension, the B60s can be a lovely headphone. But if you're looking for something that's a bit more tonally natural, and definitely if you're looking for something that's a bit more fun, then I think the SV021 and the 99 Neos are better choices. Ultimately, the 99 Neo still wears the crown for me as the best of this bunch, but the SV021 isn't too far behind, and in some ways I like its design more. It's a super comfy headphone, it looks very premium, it feels great, it's a lovely option. So if you're in the market for any of these three, I'll put links down below through to various locations. Some of them will be affiliate links, and I always appreciate any and all purchases through those affiliate links. It helps me to continue producing videos like this, getting my hands on more and different gear. So thank you for any purchases using the affiliate links down below. I hope you found this review useful and helpful. And for now, I'll leave it to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound. And for now, let me leave you to the music, so happy for listening. And for now, I'll leave you to the music. Oh dear. And for now, I'll leave you to the music, so happy listening. Oh dear. I hope you found this review useful and helpful. And for now, I'll leave you to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.